Babylon and its destruction. On the fact that everything predicted in the book of Revelation has been fulfilled at the present time, see above, and on the fact that the last judgment has already been carried out, see the previous chapter. That chapter also explains how the judgment was carried out on Muslims and people of other religions. Now we turn to the way the last judgment was carried out on the Catholics meant by Babylon, about whom the book of Revelation has much to say. There is description of its destruction in chapter 18, as follows. The angel cried mightily with a loud voice, Babylon is fallen, and has become a dwelling place of demons, a refuge for every unclean spirit, and a refuge for every unclean and hated bird. Revelation 18:1-2. Before describing that destruction, I wish to make some preliminary points. What Babylon means, and what its nature is. What the people of this Babylon are like in the other life. Which part of the spiritual world they were living in until recently. Why they were allowed to live there right up to the day of the last judgment. Then I will cover how they were destroyed, and how their dwellings became a wasteland. How all the people among them who were engaged in doing good and had a longing for truth were saved. What the circumstances are for Catholics from now on as they pass into the other world from this one. What Babylon means, and what its nature is. Babylon means everyone who wants to use religion to control others. Trying to use religion to control others is trying to take control of their souls and therefore their spiritual life itself, using as means the divine principles of the religion. In a general sense, then, Babylon means all people who have control as their aim and use religion as the means of achieving it. The reason these kinds of people are referred to as Babylon is that religious tyranny first began in ancient times, although an immediate halt was put to it. That beginning is described as a city and a tower whose top would be in heaven. Its being shut down is described by the muddling of the language of those people that led to its name, Babel, Genesis 11:1-9. For what the details of this story mean in the word's inner or spiritual meaning, see the explanation given in Secrets of Heaven 1283, 1328. We can see in Daniel that a similar tyranny began again in Babylon, but this time became established. It says of Nebuchadnezzar that he set up an image that everyone had to worship, Daniel 3:1. This is also the meaning of Belshazzar and the leaders under him drinking from the gold and silver vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had brought back from the Jerusalem temple, and worshipping gods of gold and silver and copper and iron at the same time. This is why the words numbered, weighed, divided were written on the wall, and why the king himself was killed that very night, Daniel 5:1. The vessels of gold and silver from the Jerusalem temple mean the good actions and truths taught by the church. Drinking from them while at the same time worshipping gods of gold, silver, copper, and iron means profanation, and the handwriting on the wall and the death of the king mean the judgment and destruction pronounced on people who use as means to their own ends the good actions and truths taught by the divine. The nature of people called Babylon is also described all through the prophets in Isaiah. For example, you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon: Jehovah has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers. You are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer. You are cut down to the ground. You have said in your heart, I will ascend into the heavens, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will also sit on the mount of the congregation on the farthest sides of the north, I will be like the highest. But you will be cast down into hell, to the lowest depths of the pit. I will cut off the name and the remnant of Babylon, and I will make it a possession of owls. Isaiah 14:4, 5, 12, 15, 22, 23. Elsewhere in Isaiah we find, the lion said, Babylon is fallen, and all the carved images of her god have been cast down. Isaiah 21:9. See also Isaiah 47:1, 48 hours 14 minutes, 20, Jeremiah 51:2, 3. From these passages we can see what Babylon is. It is important to know that a church becomes a Babylon when its caring and faith come to an end and self-love takes charge instead. The more free rein self-love is given, the more it rushes headlong into ruling not only over all the people on earth it possibly can, but even over heaven. Even then it does not rest, it climbs up to the throne of God and transfers God's divine power to itself. We can tell from the passages in the Word cited above that a development like this occurred before the Lord's coming. That Babylon, however, was destroyed by the Lord when he was in the world, both through its becoming totally idolatrous and through a last judgment on its people in the spiritual world. That is the meaning of the passage in the prophets about Lucifer, who is identified with Babylon there, being cast down into hell, Isaiah 14:12, 15, and the passages about Babylon falling, Isaiah 13:21, 10, 47, Jeremiah 50:51, the passage about the handwriting on the wall, Daniel 5:1, 29, and the death of Belshazzar, Daniel 5:30, 31, and the passage about the stone hewn from the rock that destroyed the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel 2:31, 45. The Babylon the book of Revelation is talking about, though, is the present-day Babylon that arose after the Lord's coming and is generally understood to be part of the Catholic world. It is actually more destructive and atrocious than the Babylon that existed before the Lord's coming because it profanes the Church's inner forms of goodness and truth, which the Lord revealed to the world when he revealed himself. What now follows will provide an overview of how destructive and profoundly atrocious it is. The Catholic clergy have no reverence for and acknowledgement of the Lord that possesses any belief in his power to save. They completely separate his divine nature from his human nature and transfer to themselves the divine power that belonged to his human nature. They forgive sins, admit people into heaven, cast people into hell, save whomever they choose, and sell salvation. So they claim for themselves functions that actually belong to divine power alone, and since they exercise this divine power, it follows that they are making themselves gods, each one at his own level of the hierarchy, by the transfer of power from the highest of them, whom they call the Vicar of Christ, to the lowest of them. By so doing they view themselves as the Lord and worship him not for his sake but for their own. They not only contaminate and falsify the word, they also keep it from the people to deny them access to any of its light of truth. Even this is not enough, they also destroy the word, believing in a divinity in the decrees of Rome that is superior to the divinity of the word. So they close the way to heaven for everyone, since the path to heaven is the acknowledgement of the Lord and faith in him and love for him, and the word is what teaches us that path, and without the Lord in the word, there is no salvation. They concentrate all their efforts on extinguishing the light of heaven that comes from divine truth so that ignorance may take its place. The denser the better, as far as they are concerned. They extinguish the light of heaven by forbidding the reading of the word and the reading of books that contain teachings from the word. They have made worship into masses conducted in a language that ordinary people do not understand and in which there is no divine truth. And in general they fill their world with false teachings that are darkness itself, that take away and scatter the light. They even persuade the common people that their life depends on trusting the clergy, relying on someone else's faith, that is, rather than their own. Further, they make all worship consist of an outward holiness with nothing inside it. They make the inside utterly empty because it contains no knowledge of goodness or truth. In reality, though, a ritual is only as outwardly worshipful of the divine as it is inwardly worshipful, because outward worship comes from inward worship. They have also introduced all kinds of idolatrous practices. They keep making more and more saints, and both see and tolerate people's adoration of them and prayers to them, almost as though the saints were gods. They display images of them everywhere, they boast of vast numbers of miracles performed by them, they devote communities and cathedrals and monasteries to them, they bring their bones out of their tombs and treat them as sacred objects even though they are absolutely worthless. In all these ways they steer the minds of all away from the worship of God to the worship of humans. Not only that, they go to great lengths to prevent anyone from emerging from that darkness into light or from the worship of idols to the worship of God. They keep founding monastic orders and stationing members of them everywhere as observers and investigators. They extort confessions of the heart, including what people are merely thinking about or wishing for, and if people do not make such confessions, they threaten their spirits with hellfire and torments in purgatory, and any who dare to speak out against the papal throne and priestly dominion are locked away in a horrendous prison that is called the prison of the Inquisition. All this is done with the sole purpose of gaining possession of the world and all its treasures and living in luxury. The clergy are the great ones, and the rest of humanity are their servants. This is not the rule of heaven over hell, though. It is the rule of hell over heaven, because to the extent that a love of being in control gains strength in anyone, especially someone of the church, hell is in control. On the fact that this love is in control in hell and actually is hell, see Heaven and Hell 551, 565. This shows that what we are dealing with here is not the church, it is Babylon, because the church exists where the Lord himself is worshipped and the word is read.